Hello everybody and welcome to another installation of What Israel Is. Now I know this is not a Friday. I have decided on doing this episode early since a friend is throwing a bachelor party on Friday. So I'm going to do something a bit different today, and I'm going to just dive right in without any news bit. Not really, at any rate. My current interests have led me, that and also a rather boring job wherein I just stare at a monitor and type things and have my headphones plugged in. My current interests have me listening to all sorts of talks, usually about political correctness and where the whole left is headed at. And as such, I sometimes hear people with whom I have very little agreements, if at all. One person whom I rather dislike but has some points is conservative thinker Ben Shapiro. And I listened to one of his Q&A sessions at I think a university over in the States. And during that Q&A, one question was directed at him, which was, how come so many American Jews, or even the majority of American Jews, are Democrats? And he gave one of the most obnoxious answers I've ever heard. He said, they aren't. That is, not that they are not, that they're not Democrats, but they're not Jews. I feel it is not merely arrogant, but also greatly, hugely insensitive. I, for example, have no faith in God. I am at least not in any conventional way God is typically described. I do not believe in a creator God. I do not believe in a judicial God, one who punishes and rewards. I certainly do not believe in a God that chooses the people and paves the way for them to reach superiority over other beings, or who paves them a way to heaven, or etc., etc. And this was the crux of what he was arguing, that most of those Jewish Democrats have absolutely no connection to the Jewish tradition and Jewish faith. But all that aside, and the fact that I eat whatever I want, and that I do on a Shabbat whatever I want, and all of that, I am still I can't really quantify it, but I'm still defined to a degree by Jewishness. What Jewishness is a tricky thing, but it is not just the one thing. There are as I said on the first episode, there are many different types of Jews. There are Karaites who do not, for example, as far as I know, wear yarmulkes, and many of the things that Orthodox Jews, many of the traditions they observe do not exist within their arsenal of commandments, simply because they are extra biblical. And there are Ethiopian Jews or Israelites who have their own traditions and their own religious laws. And there are progressive Jews, such as the Reform Jews and the conservative Jews, of whom I spoke on the latest episode. And then there are also godless Jews. It sounds like an oxymoron, maybe. He gave an example that someone who is born to a Irish Catholic home and then decides he's an atheist isn't a lapsed Irish Catholic. He's not. He is not Catholic. Now, I don't know about that, and so I can't comment. But I do know that the experience of being a Jew is not the same as that of being a Christian or specifically Irish Catholic. And this very question is a question that is deep at the heart of one of the biggest tangles, the biggest problems at the heart of what Israel is. And it is the question of what is a Jew. Is a Jew someone who's Jewish enough for Hitler? Or is a Jew the very extreme of Judaism? Is it a spectrum? Those are tough questions. And what I'm going to speak about now is exactly how Israel came to nearly be a theocracy. It almost is. In many ways, it is. How come? So, here is a bit of a preface, and I won't delve too deep because Zionism as a whole is something that deserves its own episode, but all you need to know for the time being is this. The people who lay the groundwork, the people who founded the Jewish state, were for the most part either atheists or nearly atheists, or really had very little connection to Jewish tradition and religion. They were mostly had very strong socialist leanings, and the guiding maybe principle for founding Israel for them was both folkism, the idea of the nation being a thing, something that is worth not only preserving, but and obviously it also tied in with anti-Semitism. Note, this is before the Holocaust. And this is something that is worth also mentioning, and something that I'll also dedicate a complete episode for, is the narrative, the history of anti-Semitism, and exactly how it all seemed to have been washed away by one man with a mustachio. So where was I? I was talking about how the founders of Israel were, for the most part atheists. And then that this raises a question of, why is Israel then an Orthodox Jewish state? In the sense that it has there is only one Jewish denomination really that is recognized by the state, and this is important because there is a ministry of religion in Israel. So there is no separation between synagogue and state, and also church and state, and also mosque and state. The story is as such. What we have is called the status quo. It is essentially a body of laws which are intended to make life as tolerable as possible for both hardcore Orthodox Jews and secular Jews. It means that certain services, for example, are simply unavailable on a Shabbat, the seventh day, Saturday, and that, for example, on a Passover, unleavened bread and not, regular bread, that is, not unleavened bread, which is matzah, leavened bread and all sorts of like beer or most snacks are unavailable. You can't buy those. And then there's also the deal with kosher laws, and one of the most important parts is that marriage in Israel is regulated by the chief rabbinate of Israel. That is, for Jews, Muslims are likewise compelled to marry in accordance to their clerics, and the same goes for Christians. And the chief rabbinate also decides who is Jewish, except for one bit. The law of return, which is the law that allows Jews to come to Israel and become citizens, actually goes by essentially the Nuremberg laws. So a Jew who is a Jew is decided by the Ministry of Religion, essentially. But who is Jewish enough to become a citizen of Israel is defined by essentially who would be considered Jewish enough for the Nazi regime of Germany back then. So, for example, someone who is half Jewish, which doesn't exist in the Jewish halakha. So that means someone whose father is Jewish is not considered Jewish. So that person can come to Israel and become a citizen, but then cannot, for example, marry or all sorts of things which Jews can do and non-Jews cannot. Unless, of course, he converts, and it has to be an Orthodox conversion. So that's that. So this is, and more is called the status quo. And how did this come to be? So the story is this. Back in 47, when there were talks about the partition plan, one of the stipulations was that in order for there to be a Jewish state within those defined territories, the Jews had to reach a consensus about the nature of such a state. And because Haredi Jews, Orthodox Jews, refused to recognize the sovereignty of those secular, atheist, socialist, nationalist Jews, they had to come to some sort of compromise in order to enable the founding of such a state. And thus the status quo came to be. A couple of years afterwards, there was a meeting between first Israeli Prime Minister David Ben-Gurion and a prominent rabbi, an Orthodox Ashkenazi rabbi. And during that meeting, David Ben-Gurion is reportedly asked, how can we coexist? How can we reach a society that accommodates all types of Jews? Those who are secular in their ways, and you guys, those who are Orthodox. And what the rabbi told him is this: imagine, if you will, an old battered way, and on that way meet two wagons. And it is a narrow way. One of the wagon's carts is full and the other is empty. It stands to reason that the empty cart will move out of the way to accommodate the full one. And we, the Orthodox Jews, are the full cart. This is what lies underneath Ben Shapiro's words. This notion that there is only one type of Jew, and that Jew is the Orthodox Jew. That is essentially their way of handling all aberrations, if you will, of Judaism that they meet. It doesn't matter if we're talking about, for example, Ethiopian Jews, as I mentioned before, Hasidic Jews, all Jews that are not specifically Orthodox are to them not Jews at all. Now, their meeting, as it were, was not coincidental. But that time, it wasn't just a matter of the status quo, which had to be fostered. There was also a different issue. While the founders of Israel were mostly secular, mostly atheists, both the Holocaust and also a specific program intended to make or help Arab Jews, Mizrahi Jews from Muslim countries to emigrate to Israel, made it so that more and more Jews came to Israel that were Orthodox. Those from Muslim countries were, by and large, all Orthodox in their leanings, though maybe not as strict as the Ashkenazi Orthodox, and not all of them were 100% observant, but still very much Orthodox in their leaning. And that is one of the reasons why Ben Gurion and the rabbi had that meeting. And this, so the story tells of how Ben Gurion did not take the insult in stride, and essentially he was brought to his knees. Israel is today, as I told you before, governed by religious law in several spheres of life. And though you are not, for example, arrested for eating pork in the public, you are, by the way, if you're a soldier and you eat in a base or on uniform, if you eat pork, then essentially you will be arrested and tried in accordance to martial law. But if, for example, you are operating a business on a major street in an Israeli city that is open on a Shabbat, you can do that, but you will suffer fines. Sometimes it's worth your time and your money to do that. Not always. And depending on the municipality, the fines can be very, very steep indeed. Here is one very telling quote by an Israeli thinker, which says something about maybe atheistic arrogance and how it allows, for example, Israel to become what it is in this sense. This is by a person by the name of Shlomo Avineri, and it goes like this. I do not attend synagogue, but the synagogue I do not attend is an Orthodox one. So essentially, he is in complete agreement with Ben Shapiro and with the entirety of Jewish orthodoxy. Orthodoxy is the only true form of Judaism, is it? It should be noted that there are almost no Reform Jews in Israel, or almost no conservative Jews in Israel. All in all, I think they amount to maybe 5% of practicing Jews. So maybe not almost no, but still they are a very small minority, all considered. But something about this scorn by the supposed liberal, the supposed maybe skeptic, the atheist of the progressive, the liberal, the religion that tries to accommodate the times, to maybe change according to the changes in human morality. This scorn is something I find very troubling. So, I know this is a bit short, but maybe to the point also. I will see you guys next week. And until then, have a great week. This is Avishai. See you soon.